I'm Brad Wolf, and welcome to DireDen, and this is part of our Game Master series called Mastering the Game. I have Riker from Cleric Corner, who has an amazing YouTube channel all about the empowerment of creativity in your games. How do you apply that creativity to characters and world design? And specifically today, we are talking about roles of the Game Master. We are focused on the director role of the Game Master. So Riker, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. Beautiful introduction, by the way. That was very worded very good. I appreciate it.
Well, so we're talking about game master skills and specifically talking about being a director. So if we're thinking about the game master and kind of this analogy of a movie director, what are your thoughts on being a game master and how it relates to directing a scene or directing a story like you would as a movie director?
Yes, I love this question as well as just this section of DMing style, because I, as many Dungeons and Dragons players probably have done, is we're all grown up high school drama kids, right? So we've been behind the screen or behind the curtains, and we've done these wonderful performances. And I guess in my experience, you have to talk about the style of director or any style of DMing for that matter in comparison with all the other styles, right? Whether it's a world builder, storyteller, referee, teacher, improv artist, whatever, a director to me is someone where communication is kind of in the forefront above anything.
That's a really great point.
Between your players with you, they're communicating what they want, the DM is communicating what they want, and you're creating something together. It's a creative project, just as many movies or productions are. And if the players are saying like, oh, well, I think this character or this direction in this arc specifically is something that would be really interesting and evocative, how can we kind of make that happen, or how can you provide that kind of experience for me? And the DM's like, wonderful, like these are the kind of routes that we could go. Obviously, it's up to the dice to ultimately decide, but I'm going to help make those decisions or give you those situations to make those decisions to lead your character down these paths. And to me, like that coordination, or that is the foundation of creativity that creates the best stories. And I'm just passionate about the director because I feel like that's kind of my style of DMing. So anyways,
No, that's a great
hopefully
point.
that answers the first question. We can go from there.
Right. Yeah, no, those are great points. And like, for example, like that communication is so important. And, I think that communication applies to like every aspect of game mastering. But if we dial in on communication for this aspect, like, for example, in my home game, we're like getting down to the end of the campaign, right? So the players are at like level 8 and we're going to wrap up around level 13, right?
Yeah.
So I sent out a message to my players. What are the things you want your character to do? Do you have a final story arc in mind, right? And so the player with the most complicated one, right, is he has already taken the mind flare, what's it called? The little worm thing, mind flare tadpole. So he's already turning into a mind flare, but he wants the power of a mind flare, but he doesn't want to be part of the hive mind. So his final story arc, the thing he's trying to do, and we don't know if it's going to work or not. Like you said, it's up to the dice. The final story arc is he's trying to turn himself into a lich so that he becomes like the Alhoon, right? So he becomes an undead mind flare. So he gets the powers of the mind flare. But he doesn't have to be connected to the hive mind. But in order to do that, he has to basically find a way to become a lich. So that's his.
Wow.
I don't know how we're gonna pull that off. It's gonna be wild, but we'll see. But that's the kind of thing, right? Like he says, this is what I want, and I'm like,
yeah,
we can try to make that happen. But the other players might want to stop you.
yeah. Kind of brings me to another aspect of a director or just a good DM, really. When it comes to session 0 or creating the campaign of a game, I never create it before I talk to the players. In fact, I don't create it until after the characters have already created their characters. For example, in my current Spelljammer campaign, which I've do live streams and I record, one of my players came to me, which happens to be my wife. She came to me and said, "Hey, I want my character to steal the divinity of a god.
Hmm.
And I'm like, that's pretty good. Let's see what we can do. And now we've created an entire campaign where that's kind of the aspect of the world, or the morality conflict of, if you have a world where the technology of stealing the divinity from a god, what does that look like? And what kind of consequences does that create? Right. And so obviously we had other characters that had other stories that we kind of pulled into that. But because the players came to me with their ideas of what they wanted to do, then a story was born from that. And I was just the one kind of directing them all to kind of fit together.
That's great. So you're basically taking their kind of character arcs that they have in mind and then trying to figure out how do these intersect and how do I direct these pieces to get to that point for them. Now, when you're doing that, are you also using the pre-written adventure like for the monsters and that sort of stuff? Or are you just making the rest of that stuff up?
No, it's great. I hardly ever do pre-written adventures, so most of my stuff is homebrew. But when I do, I still try to do it as much as possible. When I present, let's say, like one of the adventures from Radiant Citadel, let's say like even a one shot, right? Even pulling it even down to that kind of level, my players know generally what maybe the story is about. Let's say the Fiend of Hollow Mine, for example, which I'm holding a one shot for some of my Patreon members. They know that it's an adventure about themes, Day of the Dead kind of style, right? So they generally know, okay, so the kind of characters I want to create, and they have the option to create a backstory. And if I can take that, tie it into the story, and even change it to affect their characters, to make them more involved, to make them more motivated in the story, I will absolutely do that.
Again, empowering the players to realize, the potential they want for their characters, right?
Yeah, yeah. Because I don't think, I mean, a player doesn't want to come into a game or a campaign to play the DM story. They want to come in to play their character. And that's generally, I'm not saying every person is like that, but from my experience, people come in, they're more excited about playing their character and seeing their story come to fruition than kind of seeing what everything outside of the character has anything to do with the world, right?
One of the things you hit on there was like the theme, right? How do you kind of in this director chair, right, as you're playing the game out? So you have this structure that we just talked about, and you
Yeah.
have this theme that you're shooting for in session when things are happening. Shine the camera on that scene. How do you get that theme to come out in the middle of the session?
That's a great question. I feel like the spotlight kind of comes down to a choice, a moment where two ways there's a moment where you can go two ways at one time. And I think the spotlight oftentimes is up to the player, right? Because you're shining the spotlight on the player, it's up to them to perform. So all you can really do is lead a horse to water, right? As a
Right.
director. And so you say, like, here's the situation, here's the choice. Here is an opportunity for your player to either change or resist change through this specific moment. What are you going to do?
That's excellent. That's a great way to so you kind of you key up the scene, like kind of putting the ball on the tee, right?
Yes.
And give them the opportunity to knock it out of the park. Or maybe they don't take that opportunity and, you know, you just try it again next time, right?
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what does happen, because not everyone's an actor, not everyone is someone that performs when the spotlight is put out on them. Some people kind of shrink back and like, no, I don't, I'm not ready for this, or I don't want to, this is not my moment, or this is not something that I want to, portray or be vulnerable in. And so I think that also comes to a conversation either before or after. If you put a spotlight on a player and they're like, no, or they don't participate, take them afterward and say like, hey, I put this in front of your character and I noticed that you didn't choose in. Was that not the direction that you wanted for your character? Or
Gotcha.
is there some other way that you would like the spotlight put on you, or not at all? Do you feel like you want an arc for your character, or are you just here to play? And maybe you think, and maybe that communicates to you that you put the spotlight on this character a lot less often.
That's great. And that comes back to that communication piece and checking in with them
Hmm.
after. Because it could be, right, that they were just looking at their character sheet, thinking about, their character's abilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that combat, trying to decide which spell I should use, and they missed the moment just because they were focused on game mechanics, right? So
Yes.
it could be something as simple as that, where if you took that personally and thought, oh, this player's not invested in my game and they're not really, that could drive you down a whole path of like
Yeah.
worry or anxiety, or go into Reddit with a horror story, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hilarious that you actually mentioned that, because I played in a game for one of my friends. I was a cleric, of course, but it was a cleric who was very quiet. She didn't talk unless spoken to. She was very reserved, and I role played that at the table, meaning I barely talked. And so there were multiple occasions after the game where my DM was texting me like, "Hey, are you okay? Like, are you having fun? Like, I don't know." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm having a great time." Like, I'm playing my character. She is more reserved, and it could be even that, where a reserved character, it's not even the player that's having an issue, it's the character that is kind of taking a step back from being out in the open.
That's a good point. And then, then the question becomes, like, for me as a DM, I would say, okay, when is the moment that your character is going to talk? Like, when is
Mm-hmm.
the moment where they are going to really let it out? Like, and
Yeah.
seeing that as a potential like growth moment for the character, right? So
Mm-hmm.
just kind of setting that up in that communication between session, you know, give me the nod. Let me know when you're ready for your character to, let their voice be heard. What's going to
Yes.
drive them to stand up for themselves or speak up, that kind of
Mm-hmm.
moment. Try to set that moment up.
Yeah. I think, and to that point, and I love that you said that too, because he did exactly that. Later in the campaign, we had a incursion with a high level devil, and they were basically getting a bunch of information to kind of screw us in the end. But I made a wish. I had a wish on reserve, and I made a wish to make this devil basically forget everything that he uh had remembered, right? And the wish was given by the very devil as a trade for giving him this information. So I just missed that he like basically forgot it. And so basically what he was going to do was take me to court, or he threatened to take me to the devil's courts, right? And my DM leaned over and he's like, "Is this the moment where your character speaks up for herself? Is this the moment where she puts her foot down?" And I'm like, "Yes. Yes, it is."
Nice. Awesome. Yeah. And those are the kind of moments that can really make a campaign, like really make it memorable. And
Hmm.
that's an example of how you can take that communication outside of the game and kind of set up those moments. Um, I
Yeah.
had a I had a player uh who he was playing one of the other characters' brothers.
Okay.
And outside a game, he was like, I'm kind of tired of playing this character. I kind of want him just to die off and make a new character. I'm like, okay, then how do we use that to set your brother up for a story arc, right? So then I communicated, because they're brothers in real life and they were playing brothers in the game. So I'm like, so we
Hmm.
kind of communicated between the three of us, like what's going to happen here? How is this going to look? And
Hmm.
then we were just waiting for the right opportunity for there to be a
Yeah.
combat where he could sacrifice his life, and and then the rest of that created a whole story arc for the brother who lived, right?
And I'm sure, like, as a DM, you probably love it when a player reaches out to you out of nowhere saying, like, "Hey, can we make this happen?"
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So definitely encourage everybody out there to communicate with your DM about stuff like
Mhm.
that, and give your DMs that fuel to drive the story forward for sure.
I think that there is a director DM, but there is also a director player. And I
Mm.
feel like it's important to kind of flip the script, or make that mirror to make it more applicable to players who may be watching, where just as the DM is communicating to you, obviously you should be communicating with them. A DM that is not communicated with, if they don't know where you want your character to be, if they don't know the cool stuff that you want to accomplish, they can't help you. Right. So I love it when a player, same as you, contacts me throughout the week and being like, "Oh, I had this idea. This last campaign or this last session was great. Something happened. I wonder if I can do this." And I'm like, "Awesome. I get to use that in prep and have like a foundation that I can build off of."
That's right. Players collaborate with your DMs. We collaborate at the table, but also collaborate away from the table to enhance the story and give your campaigns even better, more exciting direction moving forward.